To the edge of time. Riley stared out of the glass viewport at the endless expanse of stars, pinpricks of light, streaks of nebulae, and the soft glow of distant galaxies stretched out in every direction. She had always dreamed of seeing the cosmos up close, but now, facing the reality of her final moments aboard the ship, the beauty of space felt bittersweet. She sighed, the soft hum of the spacecraft vibrating through the walls. "This is it," she muttered, turning away from the stars and walking through the quiet halls. Her steps echoed through the ship's corridors, each one lined with metallic doors, marked with room numbers. She passed by them absently until she found herself standing in front of room 22. Riley swiped the keycard, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, Kira sat on the small bed, her golden hair falling in waves over her shoulders. She looked up with tired, stormy eyes as Riley entered, her face lit by a weak smile. "Riley," Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," Riley replied softly, crossing the room to sit beside her. They didn't need to say much. They both knew the end was near. Trapped in orbit around a black hole with no way out. Kira's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I never thought it would end like this." Riley sighed, her heart aching. "Neither did I." For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The two of them had come so far, from escaping the icy ruins of Earth to searching for a new home among the stars. But all that hope, all that effort was for nothing now. Kira leaned her head against Riley's shoulder. "You don't have to stay, you know. If you wanted to be alone." "I'm not leaving you," Riley said firmly, wrapping her arm around her. "Not now. Not ever." Kira closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. "I don't want to be alone either." They sat like that, quietly comforting each other in the fading light of the room. Memories of their time together flashed through Riley's mind. How they had become friends as children back on Earth. How they had held each other through loss. How their friendship had grown into something deeper when the world had crumbled around them. Flashback. The alarm blared through the ship, waking Riley with a start. The robotic voice echoed through every corridor. "Emergency assembly. All personnel to the main hall." Riley's heart raced as she threw on her shoes and bolted down the narrow hallways. Her only thought was to find Kira. She knew Kira would be lost in the labyrinth of the ship, and the last thing Riley wanted was for them to be separated in a crisis. She found her standing near her room, looking confused and scared. "Come on, Kira. We need to get to the main hall." Together, they rushed to the assembly point, the large metallic doors opening to reveal rows of red seats and a podium where the ship's makeshift leader stood. Hundreds of survivors, all that was left of humanity, filled the room. The mayor's grim face greeted them as they took their seats in the back. "As many of you know," the mayor began, "we left Earth in search of a new home after the Second Ice Age. We were among the lucky few to escape, but now we face a new threat. Our ship has entered the orbit of a black hole." A collective gasp spread through the room. Riley felt her stomach drop as Kira's hand tightened around hers. "We have only hours left before we are pulled in," the mayor continued. "There's nothing we can do." Panic rippled through the crowd. Riley shot up from her seat, unable to keep quiet. "You knew? You knew for days and you didn't warn us." The mayor looked away, guilt in his eyes. "There was nothing we could do." Kira tugged at Riley's arm, pleading with her to sit down, but Riley's anger boiled over. "You let us believe we had hope. How could you?" Kira finally pulled her away, out of the assembly hall and back into the cold, sterile corridors. "Riley, stop," she said softly. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters," Riley said, her voice breaking. I wanted to believe we had a future. I wanted to believe we could make it. Kira's eyes filled with tears, and without warning, she flung herself into Riley's arms. I'm scared. Riley hugged her tightly, her heart pounding as she realized just how much she cared for Kira. I won't let anything happen to you. Back in the present, Riley blinked, the memory fading. She glanced down at Kira, still resting against her. I was angry back then, she murmured. But I'm not anymore. I'm just glad we're here together. Kira looked up at her, eyes shimmering with emotion. I've been wanting to tell you something for a long time, Riley. I love you. Riley's breath caught in her throat. She had always known deep down, but hearing Kira say it made her heart race. I love you too, Kira. I've always loved you. A small smile tugged at Kira's lips and she wiped her eyes. I thought I'd never get the chance to say it. Riley leaned her forehead against Kira's, a sense of peace washing over her. We've still got time, she whispered. And even if the black hole takes us, I'll love you to the edge of time. Kira chuckled softly, a warmth in her eyes that made Riley feel like everything would be okay, even if it wasn't. They sat there holding each other close, watching the stars outside the viewport, knowing that whatever happened, they would face it together. The silence between Riley and Kira was warm and heavy, filled with unspoken words that neither of them needed to say. They had always understood each other, even when they were too scared to voice their feelings. Now, with the universe closing in around them, everything felt simpler, clearer. Time no longer seemed like a vast, endless stretch of days, but a precious, fleeting gift. Each second mattered. I used to think about this moment, Kira murmured after a long pause. Back when we were kids on Earth, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would be like to tell you how I felt. Riley smirked, leaning her head back against the wall as she stared at the ceiling too. Yeah? And how did you imagine it? Kira gave a soft laugh, the sound like music in the quiet room. Definitely not like this. I thought it'd be at a campfire or something under the stars. Not, hurtling toward a black hole. Riley chuckled, the image playing in her mind. A campfire would have been nice. Less existential dread. Kira sighed, resting her head back against Riley's shoulder. I guess this'll do. Riley tilted her head down to look at Kira, her heart swelling. We made it through so much together. When Earth fell apart, I thought we wouldn't survive. And now, here we are at the end of everything. Kira's voice softened. But we're together. That's all that matters, Riley whispered, her fingers tracing small circles on Kira's arm. The ship's low hum was the only sound that filled the room. Outside, the stars drifted by, seemingly undisturbed by the impending doom. Riley wondered if anyone else was still awake on the ship, if they were all saying their goodbyes, preparing for the inevitable. She sighed and closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of Kira's body against her. Do you think anyone will remember us? Kira was quiet for a moment before answering. I think the stars will. They've been here long before us and will be here long after. Maybe one day, someone else will look up at the sky and wonder about the people who came before. Maybe they'll wonder about us. Riley smiled at the thought. I like that idea. For a while, they just sat together, holding each other in the soft glow of the ship's control panel lights. Time passed in a blur, but neither of them cared. Everything felt right in that moment, despite the dark horizon ahead. Flashback. Earth was cold. It had always been cold in Riley's memories. She remembered the icy wind sweeping across the fields near the settlement where she and Kira grew up. The snow-covered streets, the frozen lakes, and the endless gray skies that hung low over the collapsing world. But even in the coldest winters, Kira had always been a source of warmth. They met as children, bundled up in layers of mismatched clothes, playing outside when they could. Riley's family was small and struggling, like most of the survivors of the Second Ice Age, but Kira's family had been large, loud, and full of life. They had lived next door, and for years the two girls had spent nearly every moment together. As the world continued to freeze over, governments crumbled and resources dwindled. People began to whisper about leaving Earth, about finding a way to escape to the stars. Riley's parents scoffed at the idea, calling it a fool's dream. But when the chance to board the last remaining spaceships came, no one hesitated. They fled Earth, leaving behind everything they had ever known, clinging to the hope of survival among the stars. Riley had watched her parents fade away during those early days of the journey. The cold had taken its toll on them long before the ship had launched, and without proper medical care, they hadn't survived the trip. Kira's parents had succumbed to the same fate, leaving the two of them alone in a world that seemed to have no place for them. But even then, through the darkest of days, Riley had clung to Kira. She had always been the bright spot in Riley's life, the one thing that made her believe there was still hope. Back in the present, Riley could feel the ship's vibrations shifting slightly. It was subtle, but she knew what it meant. They were getting closer to the black hole. The end was coming. She felt Kira stir beside her, and Riley glanced down to see her looking up with wide, curious eyes. "Do you think there's something on the other side of it? Something after all this?" Riley wasn't sure how to answer. "I don't know. I like to think there's more. Maybe a new beginning. Maybe something better." Kira nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I like that idea too." The two of them sat in silence for a while longer, watching the stars as they slowly seemed to stretch and warp around the ship's viewport. Riley could feel the pull of the black hole now, its gravity distorting everything around them. The ship's lights flickered slightly, a sign that their systems were beginning to fail. "Kira," Riley said softly, her voice trembling slightly, "no matter what happens, I'm glad I'm here with you." Kira's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she smiled warmly. "Me too. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." As the ship shuddered one last time, the stars outside the viewport began to blur and fade into the blackness. The pull of the black hole grew stronger, the ship creaking as it was drawn deeper into the void. Riley tightened her grip on Kira's hand, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the black hole, not of the unknown, not of what came next. All that mattered was that they were together. "I love you, Kira," Riley whispered, her voice barely audible over the groaning of the ship's hull. "I love you too, Riley," Kira whispered back, her voice full of quiet certainty. And as the darkness consumed them, they held on to each other, knowing that their love would carry them through whatever came next, even to the edge of time.